This thing's got nothing in it anyway. They should learn to use a real gift wrap service.
That's what the HOA president said as she yanked a FedEx package off my porch and tossed it into the back of her Pearl Escalade. It was the third Christmas in a row she had stolen one of my son's packages. My son Bram is a Marine deployed in Okinawa, and what was inside that box was a hand-carved ship model he had spent 6 months on for his 7-year-old nephew. She thought my Ring doorbell was offline. She thought the little Wi-Fi jammer she had bought on Amazon had taken care of the cameras. What she didn't know was that I spent 28 years as a U.S. postal inspector. I had been quietly counting her thefts for 3 years, and by the time she opened the 4th box on the day of the Stowe Village Christmas Festival, she would be glowing purple in front of the entire town. Tell me below, would you have called the cops or marked her for the world to see? My name is Calhoun Wexler. Cal to anyone who has known me longer than 5 minutes. I spent 28 years as a special agent with the United States Postal Inspection Service, working out of the Boston Regional Office. Mail theft, wire fraud, package interception rings, identity theft schemes, the kind of crimes most people don't realize the federal government takes very seriously, until they show up at the door of someone who's been stealing checks out of mailboxes in 3 states. I retired 3 years ago. My wife Caroline and I bought a small house in a development called Pinecone Ridge, just outside the village of Stowe, Vermont. Cedar siding, a wood stove, 16 feet of porch with a view of the ridge that turns gold every October. I built a little workshop in the garage where I tinker with trail cameras and electronics, a hobby I'd let slide for 30 years while I was chasing scammers up and down I-95. Caroline is a retired English teacher and the warmest human being I have ever known. She bakes sourdough every Saturday. She runs the church Christmas drive. She plays viola in a string quartet that mostly performs at weddings and the occasional funeral. We have 2 grown kids. Our daughter, Iris, lives in Burlington with her husband, Pete, and our 7-year-old grandson, Cody. Our son, Bram, is a Marine Staff Sergeant on his 2nd deployment to Okinawa. Bram has carved wood since he was 12, whittled himself a pocket knife handle when he was 13, started carving small ships at 14 after his grandfather, my father, gave him a beat-up copy of an old Mystic Seaport ship modeling guide for his birthday. The book had been my father's. The cover was held together with electrical tape. Inside, my father had written marginal notes in pencil over 40 years of Sundays in the workshop. Bram read the whole book before he had finished his first frigate. By the time he enlisted, he was already that good. Every Christmas, no matter where the Marines have him stationed, Bram mails home 1 carved ship, a different model each year, sometimes a frigate, sometimes a Coast Guard cutter, once a fishing schooner, addressed to Cody, with the line, "From Uncle Bram, with love," carved underneath the keel. He uses a small chisel my grandfather brought home from Korea in 1953. He's been using the same chisel for 26 years. The handle has the smooth, dark patina of a tool that has been held by 3 generations of hands. 3 years ago, Bram's package didn't arrive. It was supposed to be a 1797 Constitution model. He had worked on it for 5 months. The tracking showed it had been delivered to my front porch on December 18th at 3:47 p.m. By the time Caroline got home from the post office at 4:15, the porch was empty. I filed a USPS report. The investigator on duty was a young man, clearly drowning in holiday season caseload. He told me to file online and check back in January. I filed online. By January, nothing had happened. I assumed teenagers. I assumed bad luck. I bought Cody a wooden train set and told him Uncle Bram's ship was lost in the mail. The next year, 2 of Bram's packages were stolen. A Coast Guard cutter and a small Norfolk Pinky schooner. Both delivered. Both gone within an hour. Caroline cried that year, more than I had seen her cry since her mother's funeral. The 3rd year, the year of this story, I decided I was done with assumptions. By December 2nd, 4 of our Christmas packages had already disappeared from the porch. 2 of them were Bram's. He had carved a Liberty ship for Cody and a small carved heron for Caroline as a 40th anniversary gift. Both gone before either of us got home from a single trip into the village. I sat at my kitchen table on a snowy Wednesday morning with a cup of coffee, an empty cardboard mailer, and a notepad. I wrote down every disappearance over 3 years, every date, every time, every weather condition, every camera blackout, every neighbor I had spoken to, every license plate I had quietly noted in the cul-de-sac. By the third coffee, I had a profile. Not a lucky teenager, not a random thief. Every theft happened on a weekday. Every theft happened between 2 and 4 in the afternoon. Every theft happened in a window of 19 to 38 minutes, when both Caroline and I were verifiably away from the house. Every Ring camera outage matched a 30-second precision deauthentication signal. None of the stolen items had ever shown up on a regional resale market that the FBI's stolen property database tracked. None of the stolen items had ever been recovered. Someone with a key card to the community gate. Someone who knew our schedule. Someone who knew exactly which window of time the porch was unwatched. Someone who knew enough electronics to operate a commercial-grade jammer. Someone with somewhere to put 46 packages over 3 years, and a way to convert them into money without leaving a trail. Someone who lived in Pinecone Ridge. That afternoon, I drove down to my workshop and unboxed a piece of equipment I had ordered the week before, an RF spectrum analyzer. By Saturday, I knew exactly how the cameras were being jammed. By Sunday, I knew exactly who I was hunting. The RF analyzer told me the camera blackouts were not random. Each one began with a Wi-Fi deauthentication broadcast at exactly 2.4 gigahertz, lasting between 4 and 8 minutes, transmitted from a low-power source inside the development. The signature was clean, commercial-grade jammer, the kind sold on Amazon as a Wi-Fi tester for under $100. I drove the perimeter of Pinecone Ridge with a directional antenna duct-taped to the inside of my truck cab on Sunday morning. Quiet road, fresh snow, plenty of time. The antenna was a homemade Yagi I had built in the workshop the previous evening using copper rod, a coaxial connector, and a wooden boom from a broken broomstick. It looked like something a high school student would bring to a science fair. It worked beautifully. I logged signal strength readings on a clipboard at every driveway in the development, 61 houses across 2 laps. The signal peaked in a 5-house arc on the western side of the ridge. By the 3rd lap, I had the source narrowed to a 4-house cluster on the far side of the cul-de-sac. By the 5th lap, I had it narrowed to 1 driveway. I logged the readings 3 more times to be certain. They came back identical. The driveway belonged to Bridget Halverson, our HOA president. Brigitte was 49, blocky under linen blazers, blonde hair that always looked freshly highlighted, and famous in Pinecone Ridge for the extraordinary range and creativity of her HOA finds. She had been president for 7 years. She drove a pearl Cadillac Escalade with a custom tow hitch and a chrome bumper she shined every Saturday morning. Her husband Vance ran a small business he called Halverson Antique Reseller out of a converted barn behind their house. Vance was a quiet man with a ginger beard and a tendency not to make eye contact. I had filed 3 formal HOA complaints in 2 years, once about Brigitte's habit of issuing parking citations to a disabled neighbor, once about her arbitrary holiday lights cutoff rule that left a young couple with twins fined $800, and once about her demand that Caroline remove a Marine Corps flag from our porch. Caroline kept the flag up. Brigitte added the flag to a pending review docket that had been pending review for 18 months. I had assumed she found me annoying. I had not assumed she was stealing my son's mail. Monday morning, I drove to the village post office. The new postmaster, a man named Wendell Trabue, had taken the job 6 months earlier. I introduced myself, showed him my old USPIS credentials, retired, but still recognizable, and we sat in his back office for 45 minutes. He pulled the package theft logs for the development, 41 reports in 3 years, cluster of 15 on Pinecone Ridge alone. His predecessor had filed them all as unrecovered and marked them low priority. I asked Wendell if he would mind if I made a few discreet calls to my old office. He said, "Please do." I called Special Agent Olwyn Pendry that afternoon. Wynn and I had partnered for 9 years out of Boston, kicking down doors on a check fraud ring in Worcester, surveilling a stolen prescription operation in Providence, and once spending 3 winter weeks in a freezing van outside a stamp dealer's shop in Lowell, waiting for a delivery that never came. She was now running the New England regional desk, and known across the agency as the agent who closed the 2018 Connecticut mail theft ring without firing a shot. She picked up on the second ring. Cal Wexler, she said. I was told you were retired. I am retired. I'm calling about a hobby. Tell me about your hobby. I laid out 3 years of pattern data, the RF analysis, the suspect's HOA position, and the fact that her husband ran an antique resale business. Wynn was quiet for a long time. Then she asked me to send her everything I had. She called me at 6 o'clock Tuesday morning. Cal, she said, Vance Halverson's eBay account is showing 23 high-end listings posted in the last 90 days. 2 of them are marine carvings. One is signed B. Wexler on the underside. I sat with the phone in my hand for a full minute before I could trust my voice. I drove that afternoon to the local sheriff's substation in Stowe and filed a formal report. Deputy Imogene Krause, late 50s, salt and pepper hair, retired school teacher who had taken the deputy job 3 years earlier as a second career, listened the whole way through, took notes, and told me she would loop in the village police chief. That evening, while Caroline was at quartet rehearsal, I walked our porch in the dark with a thermal camera. There were footprints in the snow leading from the cul-de-sac up to my porch and back, dated by the temperature reading. They were a women's size 8. They circled my Ring doorbell once before turning around. I drove back to the workshop, opened a notebook, and started sketching the trap. Bridget struck again on Thursday afternoon. The package was a small box from LL Bean, a pair of fleece-lined slippers Caroline had ordered for her sister's birthday. UPS scanned it on the porch at 2:14 p.m. By 2:23 p.m., it was gone. The Ring doorbell had a 9-minute outage starting at 2:09 p.m. Same Wi-Fi deauth signature. I called Wynn Pendry that evening with the timestamps. She added them to her file. Friday morning, I drove down to the HOA monthly meeting at the community clubhouse. Brigitte ran the meeting from a folding table at the front of the room, gavel in one hand and a clipboard of agenda items in the other. I sat in the back row next to Caroline. Halfway through the meeting, Brigitte brought up the recurring porch theft issue. She said it was deeply concerning to property values and proposed forming a Pinecone Ridge Security Committee, which she would chair. She suggested the thieves were almost certainly outsiders, possibly delivery drivers from rotating contractor pools. I raised my hand. Brigitte pretended not to see me for about 8 seconds before acknowledging me. I've had 4 packages stolen since November, I said. All 4 were stolen on weekday afternoons, during precise windows when my Ring camera was being electronically jammed. I'd be interested in joining the security committee. The room got quiet. A few neighbors I knew well turned around and looked at me. Bridget smiled the way a hostess smiles at a guest who has knocked over a candle. Cal, the committee is going to be a very informal advisory body. I don't think you would find it terribly engaging. I'd like to volunteer anyway. I'll take it under consideration. She moved on to the next agenda item, which happened to be a new HOA citation against me for improper mounting hardware on my Ring doorbell, $85 fine, filed by Bridget herself the previous Tuesday. Caroline reached over and put her hand on my knee. After the meeting, an older man named Wilbur Jakes came up to me in the parking lot. Wilbur was 73, a retired veterinarian, and the kind of person who wore the same wool cap from October through April. He looked over his shoulder once, then said quietly, "Cal, we've had 11 packages stolen in the last 2 years, including my granddaughter's hearing aid batteries last December. I'd like to talk to you sometime away from the clubhouse." I told him to come by the workshop on Saturday. By the time Saturday came, Wilbur Jakes had texted 3 other neighbors. By the time the 4 of them sat in my workshop with cups of black coffee at 10 in the morning, my number of confirmed local victims had grown to 9 households. 43 packages in 3 years. Nobody had filed a federal report because the local USPS office had told everyone to file online and forget about it. Brigitte, as president, had specifically told the HOA that filing federal complaints would only generate paperwork and embarrass the community. The pattern was complete. That afternoon, I drove down to my workshop alone and laid out the components of what I had been quietly assembling for 2 weeks. A heavy stock cardboard FedEx mailer, 6 inches by 10 by 4. Fake gift labels printed by Caroline's quartet pianist, who ran a small graphic design business out of her kitchen. Inside, a 360-degree GoPro Max, fully charged, motion activated, programmed to begin recording the moment the box was lifted from a flat surface. A small GPS tracker the size of a silver dollar, sewn into the inside flap. 4 ounces of UV reactive fluorescent purple glitter, sealed inside a latex balloon, rigged to a spring trigger that fired the instant the lid was opened. A small canister of cinnamon-scented oil wired to the same trigger. And a soft cloth pouch containing a packet of UV fluorescent ink crystals, a forensic-grade powder used by federal agencies to mark stolen currency, that would adhere invisibly to any skin or fabric the trigger touched, and remain visible under blacklight for up to 72 hours, even through 3 rounds of soap and water. The trigger mechanism was the part I had spent the most time on. It was a modified mousetrap arm, wired to a magnetic reed switch. The switch was set to fire the moment a small neodymium magnet, held in place by the closed lid, moved more than a quarter inch. The whole assembly weighed less than 4 ounces and was silent until activated. I tested it 9 times in the workshop before I trusted it. The whole assembly fit cleanly inside the mailer, with no visible weight discrepancy. From the outside, it looked like a $100 gift box from a designer wrapping service. The shipping label read, "From Coastal Carving Company, Newport, Rhode Island." The recipient address was mine. I sealed it. I labeled it. I marked the date in my notebook. Wynne Pendry drove up from Boston on Saturday morning. She arrived in a black Ford Edge with federal plates, parked 2 blocks down at Wilbur Jakes' house so it wouldn't be recognized, and walked the last quarter mile through the snow to my workshop in a navy parka and LL Bean boots. Wynne was 57, silver-streaked hair pulled back, gray eyes that didn't blink when they were thinking. She set her coffee on my workbench and walked the entire bait box layout in silence. "Cal," she said when she finished, "this is overkill." "I know. It's also kind of beautiful." She pulled a folder out of her bag. Inside were federal authorization documents naming me as a private cooperator on an active federal investigation, and a list of every Vance Halverson eBay listing from the past 18 months. There were 411 listings. Wynne had cross-referenced 93 of them against reported stolen package descriptions in a 6-county area of Vermont. 82 had matched. "Cal," she said, "this is not just a Pinecone Ridge problem. This is a regional fence operation. Bridget is the hands, Vance is the laundry. The marketplace is doing the rest. Once we have evidence on both of them, this becomes a federal conspiracy case." She showed me one listing in particular, a 1797 Constitution model, listed at $1,200. Vance had named it Master Carved Wooden Frigate, Estate Find. The thumbnail photograph showed the keel underside. The signature B. Wexler was clearly visible. I stared at the photograph for a long time. Wynne waited. "Wynne," I said, "I want to recover that ship. Cody is going to hold it on Christmas morning." "That's the plan, Cal." We spent 4 hours that afternoon designing the operation. Wynne would coordinate with USPIS Inspector Tarvis Kemp, with the Stowe Police Department, and with Wendell Trabue at the post office. The bait box would be delivered by a USPIS credentialed driver, scanned at 2 p.m. on December 18th, and left on my porch. The GPS tracker inside would be live monitored by Wynne's team out of a rented suite at the Stowe Mountain Lodge. But the part Wynne and I argued about was the climax. I told her about the Stowe Village Christmas Festival on December 20th. Brigitte was the festival committee chair. She would be on stage at 7 p.m. giving the tree lighting address. 600 people would be in the village square. "I want her tagged in front of the whole town," I said. Wynne frowned. "Cal." "The other 13 victim families want it too. Wilbur Jakes asked me yesterday if there was a way to do this publicly." "Cal, the federal preference is a quiet morning arrest at her residence." "Wynne, this isn't just a federal case. This is 3 years of small humiliations and missing letters, and a child crying about a missing uncle. The community needs to watch her be done." Wynne sat with her coffee for a while. Then she said, "If we do it at the festival, it has to be ironclad. Tagged glitter under blacklight will not hold up alone in court. We need the GoPro. We need the GPS chain of custody. We need the Vance arrest at the antique shop happening simultaneously. And we need the mayor's office briefed at least 4 hours in advance." "I'll handle the mayor. I'll handle the rest." She finished her coffee. She zipped her parka. She walked back to her car through the snow. That night, I sat with Caroline at the kitchen table and walked her through the plan. She listened the whole way. Then she got up, went to the kitchen drawer, and pulled out a packet of small ribbon bows. "What are those for?" I asked. "I'm going to attach them to 14 blacklight flashlights tomorrow, the kind hardware stores sell for finding pet stains. I'll wrap them in Christmas paper and pass them out to the other victim families as a small holiday tradition. That way, at the festival, when the moment comes, every one of us has a flashlight." I looked at her for a long time. "Caroline," I said, "have I told you lately how much I love you?" She smiled. "Tell me again on the 20th. The midpoint of the operation came on a quiet Sunday afternoon, 3 days before the bait was scheduled to drop. Wynne called me at 1 o'clock with information she had pulled from a federal warehouse seizure record search. "Cal," she said, "sit down for this one." I sat at my kitchen table with the phone on speaker so Caroline could listen. The Vermont State Police executed a search warrant on a warehouse in St. Johnsbury 2 months ago for a separate trafficking case. The warehouse was leased through a holding company. The holding company name appears on the back of one of Vance Halverson's old business cards we pulled from his eBay shipping records. The warehouse contained 147 cardboard boxes. She paused. "Cal, the boxes contain stolen packages from at least 11 Vermont counties, 3 years of accumulated theft. Estimated retail value somewhere north of $200,000. There are children's gifts in there. There are veteran care packages. There are prescription deliveries. There is, and Cal, you need to hear me on this, there is a sealed FedEx mailer addressed to a Cody Tannehill from a Sergeant Bram Wexler, dated December 10th. I closed my eyes. Caroline put her hand over her mouth. "The state police didn't know what they had," Wynne continued. "They were looking for synthetic narcotics. The warehouse manager had a deal with the state's attorney that he didn't know what was in the boxes, that he was just leasing storage. He's now cooperating. He's identified Vance as the man who paid him in cash every 6 weeks." I asked slowly, "Are you telling me Bram's ship for this year is in that warehouse?" "Cal," Wynne said, "I'm telling you Bram's ship for this year is in federal evidence custody, and every ship Bram has mailed home for 3 years is probably sitting in that warehouse with it." I sat with that for a minute. Wynne went on. "The bigger picture is this. Brigitte and Vance Halverson are not amateurs. They have been running an organized fence operation for at least 4 years. They are part of a network the U.S. Attorney's Office in Burlington has been quietly trying to identify since 2022. The Pinecone Ridge thefts are one node of a much larger system. By cooperating with my operation on the 18th, you are not just clearing your son's packages. You are helping us close a federal RICO-adjacent investigation that has been stuck for 2 years. I asked her what changed in the plan. "Nothing changes for you," she said. "We do the bait drop. We do the festival. We arrest as planned. But Cal, every package Brigitte has stolen, all of that material is recoverable. We are going to walk those packages back to their families before Christmas Eve." I sat for a long time. Then I said, "Wynne, I need to call my son." She told me to call him. I dialed Bram's deployment number from the kitchen. It was 4 o'clock in the morning in Okinawa. He answered on the 3rd ring, sleep in his voice. "Dad, what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong, son. I need to tell you something, and you need to hear it before you read it in the news next week." I told him. The whole thing, the 3 years, the HOA president, the Wi-Fi jammer, the warehouse in St. Johnsbury, 43 carved ships sitting on plywood shelves under fluorescent light in a federal evidence locker, Vance's eBay listings with our family signature on the keels, the fact that every ship he had carved was about to be returned to its rightful family. Bram was quiet for almost a minute. I could hear him breathing. I could hear the wind moving across whatever rooftop his barracks looked out on. Then he said, "Dad, did Cody know?" I told him no. Cody had been told every year that the ship was lost in the mail. Bram was quiet again. Then he said, "Dad, get her, and tell Cody his grandfather is the most patient man I know." I told him I would. I hung up and sat at the kitchen table with the phone in my hand for a long time. Caroline came in and sat next to me. She put her head on my shoulder. "What did he say?" she asked. I told her. She cried quietly for a few minutes. Then she got up, washed her face, and started making dinner. The 5 days between Wynn's warehouse call and the bait drop were the most prepared 5 days of my life. Caroline ran the community side. By Tuesday afternoon, she had distributed 14 Christmas-wrapped UV blacklight flashlights to 14 victim households. She framed it as a porch theft awareness gift and asked each family to bring the flashlight to the village festival on the 20th as part of a small surprise community demonstration. Wilbur Jakes laughed when he opened his. He kissed Caroline on the cheek and said, "I haven't been part of an undercover operation since Vietnam. Let's go." Wynn ran the federal side. USPIS Inspector Tarvis Kemp drove up from the Boston office on Wednesday and met with the Stowe police chief, a no-nonsense woman named Annika Loomis. They walked the village square together. They mapped sightlines. They identified entry and exit points. They placed plainclothes officers on the festival committee under the cover of extra holiday volunteers. Annika briefed Mayor Wendell Alcott personally on Thursday morning. The mayor was a retired school principal. He listened for 45 minutes, asked 3 sharp questions, and then said, "Chief, I want her tagged on stage. The town deserves to see it." The state police side was handled by a captain named Glenmore Halsey, who had been quietly working the Vance Halverson side of the file for 2 years without realizing the Pinecone Ridge connection. Halsey would lead the simultaneous Vance arrest at the Antique Barn at exactly 7:15 p.m. on the 20th, 10 minutes after the bait box was opened at the festival. I ran the bait box. On Wednesday evening, Caroline and I drove to the FedEx office in Burlington and packed the final assembly. The 360 GoPro was synced to a cellular uplink. The GPS tracker was running a 30-second ping interval. The glitter trigger was set to activate within 2 seconds of the lid coming off. I sealed the box at 11 p.m. I labeled it. I attached the printed gift card. Caroline watched me from the kitchen counter with her arms crossed and a small smile on her face. "What does the card say?" she asked. I turned the box around. The card read, "For Cody, from Uncle Bram, with love." Caroline's eyes filled. She nodded once. "He's going to feel it from Okinawa," she said. I told her I hope so. Thursday morning, I drove the box to the Stowe post office. Wendell Trabue logged it into the system as a normal incoming package. He gave me a wink and processed it through the morning sorting line. That evening, I sat in the workshop with Wilbur Jakes and 4 other victim neighbors and walked through the festival plan. Each family was assigned a specific position in the village square. Each family knew when to activate their flashlight. We rehearsed the timing twice. By Friday morning, I had not slept more than 3 hours a night in a week. Caroline made me eggs. She poured me coffee. "Cal," she said, sitting down across from me, "I want you to think about something. After this is over, what do you want to come out of it for the community? Not for you, for the town." I thought for a minute. "I want a community package program," I said. "Senior neighbors holding packages for working neighbors. A real porch watch system. And I want to put the donation portion of the federal restitution into the Stowe Veterans Home." Caroline nodded. "Then that's what we're going to ask for at sentencing." The bait box arrived on my porch at exactly 1:58 p.m. on Friday, December 18th. I was sitting in Wilbur Jakes' living room 3 doors down with a thermos of coffee, 2 laptops, a portable Wi-Fi Spectrum monitor, and Wynn Pendry on a federal phone line. Wilbur's wife, Constance, was knitting in the recliner. From his front window, we had a perfect oblique view of my porch. The USPIS credentialed delivery driver, a Stowe police officer named Jamal Burnett, wearing a borrowed UPS uniform, set the box on the porch, scanned it, and walked back to his truck without rushing. The Wi-Fi Spectrum monitor lit up at 2:03 p.m. Same broadcast pattern as every previous theft. Same source location across the cul-de-sac. At 2:06 p.m., a pearl Cadillac Escalade rolled slowly past my driveway. The driver's side window was tinted. The Escalade kept going to the end of the cul-de-sac, turned around, and came back at 2:08 p.m. It pulled into my driveway. The engine kept running. Brigitte Halverson stepped out, wearing a cream-colored down parka, gray slacks, and tan boots. She walked up my porch steps with her hands in her pockets. She glanced left. She glanced right. She picked up the bait box and turned it over in her hands once, reading the shipping label. She paused for half a second when she saw the From line, Coastal Carving Company, Newport, Rhode Island. Her face did something I could not quite read through the binoculars. Calculation, maybe. Greed, maybe. The pleasure of a person who has decided, for the 400th time, that the rules do not apply to her. She walked back to the Escalade. She set the box on the passenger seat. She drove away. The whole transaction took 53 seconds. The GPS tracker pinged her route in real time, down our cul-de-sac, through the Pinecone Ridge Gate, down Maple Lane, across Route 100, up the long gravel drive to the Halverson barn. At 2:21 p.m., the GPS pinged stationary inside the barn. At 2:23 p.m., the GoPro internal motion sensor triggered. At 2:24 p.m., the lid trigger fired. Wynn was on the phone with me when it happened. The cellular uplink streamed the audio first, a woman's voice yelling, then a high-pitched scream, then a man's voice swearing, followed by 90 seconds of confused movement and what sounded like running water. Wynn was laughing. She was actually laughing. I had not heard her laugh in 15 years. "Cal," she said, "tell me you're getting this." I was. The GoPro footage showed Brigitte and Vance covered from the chest up in luminescent purple glitter that was not coming off. The fluorescent ink had dyed both of their hands a faint amber color, invisible in normal light. They were trying to wash it off in a utility sink. They were not succeeding. They eventually carried the box outside, tossed it in the snow behind the barn, and went back inside. The GoPro kept recording from the snowbank. The GPS kept pinging. At 2:47 p.m., Brigitte came back out and tried to bury the box under loose snow. She gave up after about a minute. She walked back to the Escalade and drove home. Wynn and I watched the entire sequence on her federal laptop. "Cal," she said, "we have her on 12 different counts before she even got back in the car." Wilbur Jakes set down his coffee mug. "Cal," he said, "I think this calls for a fresh pot." Constance laughed without looking up from her knitting. I called Caroline. I told her the bait had been taken and the trigger had fired clean. I told her every piece of evidence was in federal custody. I told her Brigitte was glowing purple in her own bathroom mirror at this exact moment and would not be able to wash it off in time for the festival. Caroline was quiet for a beat. Then she said, "Then we have 48 hours. Let's make her Christmas one to remember." Saturday and Sunday felt like the slowest 48 hours of my life. Brigitte made 3 public appearances that weekend. The first was at the Stowe Village Tree Lighting Committee's final dress rehearsal on Saturday afternoon. She showed up wearing a high-collared turtleneck and a pair of cream-colored gloves. Annika Loomis was in the audience as a festival security volunteer. Annika texted me at 3:15 p.m. with one word: glove. She had been studying Brigitte's hands all morning. Brigitte had been wearing the gloves indoors. Brigitte had been wearing them through coffee. Brigitte had been wearing them through a microphone check that should have required bare fingers. The fluorescent ink was clearly still on her hands. Brigitte's second appearance was at the Saturday afternoon community Christmas market. She wore a long scarf, the same gloves, and a different coat. She walked through 3 booths, said hello to 4 neighbors, and left after 18 minutes. She did not stop at any of the food vendors. Her third appearance was at the Sunday morning HOA emergency meeting that she had called herself. I went to that meeting. So did Caroline. So did Wilbur Jakes. So did 6 other neighbors from our victim network. We sat in the back row of the clubhouse in a quiet line. Brigitte called the meeting to order at 10 a.m. She announced that, due to recent ongoing security concerns, she was proposing that the HOA assume formal control of all package delivery within the development. She suggested all packages be redirected to a central holding facility she would personally manage out of the clubhouse for safekeeping and tracking purposes. She kept her gloves on the entire meeting. I raised my hand. "Brigitte," I said, "are you proposing the HOA take possession of every package delivered to every Pinecone Ridge home?" "Yes, Cal, for security purposes." "On the day after a string of porch thefts in our development?" "Yes, Cal." "And you would be the sole person with access to that holding facility?" As HOA president, yes. I let that sit in the air for a moment. Brigitte, I said, I think we should table this proposal until after the holiday season. Wilbur Jakes raised his hand. Bridget, he said, I move we postpone the vote until January. Caroline raised her hand. Second. 6 other neighbors raised their hands. The vote to postpone passed 9-2. Brigitte adjourned the meeting at 10:45. She walked out without making eye contact with me. That night, Caroline and I sat by the wood stove with a glass of bourbon each. The snow outside was falling in the slow, patient way it falls when the storm doesn't have anywhere else to be. Caroline said, Cal, are you nervous? I told her I was not. I told her I had worked 28 years for moments like this one. She put her hand over mine. Cal, she said, Bram is going to be so proud of you. The Stowe Village Christmas Festival opened at 5 p.m. on Monday, December 20th. The village square was packed, 600 people, locals, weekend tourists, families with kids on shoulders, a high school choir on risers, a local radio host broadcasting from a folding table near the bandshell. The smell of roasted chestnuts and mulled cider drifted across the snow. A 40-foot blue spruce dominated the center of the square, dark and waiting for the 7 o'clock lighting. Brigitte Halverson arrived at 6:15 p.m. She wore a long charcoal coat, a red cashmere scarf, leather gloves, and a black knit hat pulled low over her forehead. She greeted 3 festival volunteers and walked to the bandshell to review her notes. Vance Halverson had stayed home with what he had told a neighbor was a sudden cold. Captain Glenmore Halsey was already in position at the end of the Halverson driveway, with 3 unmarked vehicles and a forensics team. Caroline and I arrived at 6:30, with Cody between us, wearing a red scarf his grandmother had knitted. Iris and Pete had driven up from Burlington. Bram had video called us at 6 a.m. from Okinawa and told us to go take care of it. Wilbur Jakes had distributed the 14 UV blacklight flashlights. Each family was in position. At 6:55 p.m., Mayor Wendell Olcott took the bandshell stage. He welcomed the crowd and introduced Brigitte for the 7 o'clock tree lighting. Brigitte stepped to the microphone. She thanked the committee and every single one of you who makes Stowe the most beautiful Christmas town in New England. At 7 p.m. exactly, she pressed the lighting switch. The blue spruce burst into 40-foot color. The crowd cheered. The high school choir started O Holy Night. At 7:03 p.m., Mayor Olcott returned to the microphone. Folks, he said, before we move on to the carols, the festival committee has one more announcement. I'd like to invite Special Agent Olwyn Pendry of the United States Postal Inspection Service to the stage. Wynn walked up the steps in a Navy parka, with her federal credentials hanging from a lanyard. Police Chief Annika Loomis followed. 2 USPIS inspectors and 3 Stowe police officers fanned out at the foot of the stage. Brigitte's smile flickered. Wynn took the microphone. Good evening, Stowe, she said. Tonight we are concluding a federal investigation into a 3-year mail theft conspiracy operating out of an HOA in this very community. The crowd went still. Wynn continued. She named the warehouse in St. Johnsbury. She named the $200,000 in stolen merchandise. She named the 11 Vermont counties affected. She gestured to Caroline. At this time, Wynn said, I would like to ask any community member who has been a victim of porch package theft in the past 3 years to raise the small flashlight you received from Mrs. Caroline Wexler over the past 2 weeks. 14 UV blacklight flashlights rose in the crowd. Wilbur Jakes lifted his from the front row beside his wife Constance. The retired school teacher couple, 2 doors down from us, raised theirs from the midsection. The young family who had been fined $800 over their twin daughter's birthday lights raised 3 flashlights, one held by their 7-year-old. A widow named Hetty Marsh, who had lost her late husband's last carved birdhouse to one of the thefts, raised hers from the back row with both hands. Now, Wynn said, please point your flashlights at the bandshell stage. 14 beams converged on Brigitte Halverson. Her cream-colored gloves and her red cashmere scarf, and her charcoal coat, and her face all burst into ultraviolet purple, luminescent, glowing, unmistakable. The fluorescent ink on her hands lit up amber. The fine glitter that had been covering her arms and chest for 2 days lit up in shimmering constellations across her body. The purple traveled up her neck, across her jawline, into her hairline. Her scarf was a glowing crimson where the fibers had absorbed the trigger spray. Her gloves were a deep electric violet, from fingertip to wrist. There was no missing it. The crowd inhaled as one. Brigitte raised her gloved hand to her face. The hand was glowing. Wynne turned to her. "Mrs. Bridget Halverson," she said, "you are under arrest for federal mail theft, federal possession of stolen mail, federal conspiracy, and Vermont state theft of property. Captain Glenmore Halsey is at this moment placing your husband Vance Halverson under arrest at your residence. The Vermont State Police have recovered approximately 147 boxes of stolen packages from a warehouse you have been using for 4 years. We will be returning every recoverable package to its rightful owner before Christmas Eve." Annika Loomis stepped forward with handcuffs. The cuffs clicked. The crowd did not cheer. The crowd did not boo. The crowd just watched. Wynne turned to me. "Cal, did you want to add anything?" I walked up the steps. I tapped the microphone twice. "My name is Calhoun Wexler," I said. "I spent 28 years catching mail thieves for the United States Postal Inspection Service. Most of them I caught quietly. This one I caught from my grandson, who has been waiting 3 years to receive a hand-carved ship from his Uncle Bram, a Marine deployed in Okinawa. Tonight, that ship is coming home. So are 43 other carved ships to 43 other families." I looked at Brigitte. She did not look at me. I looked at Cody. "Buddy, want to come up here?" Cody walked up the steps with Caroline. Wynne handed him a small wrapped box. He opened it carefully. Inside was the Constitution model, Bram's signature still legible underneath the keel. The crowd cheered for 2 full minutes. I led Cody and Caroline back to our seats. The federal case moved fast. Brigitte and Vance Halverson were indicted on a 14-count federal indictment within 9 days. Mail theft, possession of stolen mail, receipt of stolen mail, conspiracy, wire fraud through eBay listings, Vermont state theft, tampering with federal evidence. The warehouse manager's cooperation pushed the conspiracy charges into the higher tier. Plea negotiations took 6 weeks. Brigitte was sentenced to 18 months of federal supervised release, 2,000 hours of court-ordered community service, and $314,000 in restitution. Vance served 14 months at the federal facility in Devens, Massachusetts. They sold the Pinecone Ridge house to a young veterinarian and her husband at a substantial loss and moved to a rented apartment in Rutland. The Pinecone Ridge HOA held a special election on January 8th. Bridget was removed from the presidency by a vote of 42-3. The new president was Wilbur Jakes' wife, Constance, who had quietly been waiting for someone to ask her for 9 years. Every package recovered from the St. Johnsbury warehouse was returned to its rightful owner before Christmas Eve. 43 Wexler family ships came home to 43 families. Cody's Constitution joined Bram's earlier carved frigate, schooner, cutter, and Liberty ship. A fleet of 5 he displayed on a custom shelf in his bedroom that his father Pete built over a single weekend. Bram came home on emergency leave on December 28th. He stayed for 10 days. Cody slept in his uncle's bed every night of that visit. The Stowe Village Christmas Festival became, briefly, a national news story. The footage of 14 UV flashlights converging on a glowing HOA president went viral on 3 cable channels. The phrase, "Glitter Bomb Christmas," appeared on a late-night talk show monologue. Caroline declined a Today Show interview. So did I. So did Cody, who told his mother, "Mom, I just want to play with my ship." In February, Caroline and I formalized 2 community projects. The first was Pinecone Ridge Watch, a senior-led community package program where retired neighbors hold packages for working families until they get home. We had 31 volunteers in the first week. By April, we had been asked to consult with HOA boards in 3 neighboring Vermont towns. By June, the program had been adopted by a senior center in Burlington and a small church in Montpelier. By the time the snow came back the next year, more than 200 Vermont households were using some version of the protocol Caroline and I had sketched on a yellow legal pad in our kitchen one Friday morning over coffee. The second was the Bram Wexler Veterans Workshop Fund, a small grant program at the Stowe Veterans Home for veterans pursuing woodworking, carving, and other handcraft skills. The first grant funded a full-time carving instructor for a 6-month residency. Bram, when he heard about it, called me from Okinawa and cried. The second grant funded a small workshop space in the basement of the veterans' home with proper ventilation, 3 workbenches, and a complete set of carving tools. The third grant paid for 40 pounds of basswood and a starter library that included 3 copies of my father's old Mystic Seaport ship modeling guide. Bram tracked down a publisher willing to reprint the original. The new copies have my father's name on the dedication page. In March, I started writing a small zine for senior citizens about how to protect their porch packages. 24 pages. Cost me $400 to print 3,000 copies. The Vermont AARP chapter mailed them out to every member household over 65. Bram came home for 2 weeks of leave that summer. The first thing he did was sit at our kitchen table with Cody and walk him through every ship in his bedroom shelf. The Constitution, the Coast Guard cutter, the Norfolk Pinky schooner, the Liberty ship, the small carved heron. He explained what each rigging line was called. He explained why the Constitution had 3 masts and the schooner had 2. He showed Cody how to hold the small chisel my grandfather had carried home from Korea. Cody held it the way another 7-year-old might hold a bird's egg. Carolyn made fresh sourdough that afternoon. The kitchen smelled of warm bread and the cedar shavings Bram brought in on his cuffs. Iris and Pete drove up for the weekend. We sat around the kitchen table, 6 of us, 3 generations, 2 carved birds on the windowsill, a 1797 Constitution model on the placemat in front of Cody, and ate dinner together for the first time in 3 years that did not have a missing piece in it. Some evenings now I sit on the porch with Caroline, after the snow has melted and the light is turning gold across the ridge. We watch the cul-de-sac. There are no Wi-Fi jammers running anymore. There are no cameras going dark. There are 46 Christmas packages riding on a delivery truck somewhere, addressed to 100 different homes that will receive them on time, this year and every year. Cody comes up most weekends. He brings the Constitution. He plays with it on the floor of my workshop. He has started carving small wooden objects of his own. A duck, a snowman, a tiny ship. He carves under the keel of each one. From Cody, with love. That's what I keep coming back to. The patient hands win. The loud ones think they can take what those hands have made. They cannot. Not in the long run. Not when the people who love quiet work are paying attention.
There's something about Klaus Wexler's story that hits different. It isn't the sting. It isn't the glitter. It isn't even Cody holding that ship in front of the whole town. It's the patience. 3 years of disappearing packages. 3 years of a marine son carving ships nobody got to see. 3 years of an HOA president running a federal mail theft ring while everyone assumed she was just officious and rude. Kyle could have lost his temper at any point. He did it. He ran the case the way he had run cases for 28 years, quietly, methodically, with 1 carefully labeled box, 14 UV flashlights, and a wife who saw the whole plan and bought ribbons for it. That's a real lesson. Loud people grab things off porches, quiet people document, and when the documentation finally meets the spotlight, the loud ones don't get to be loud anymore. The Pinecone Ridge Watch program now serves 3 Vermont towns. 43 Christmas packages came home that year. If you ever lost a porch package, drop a story in the comments. Hit subscribe. Next week, the HOA that fined a Marine veteran for flying his Bronze Star ribbon at half-staff. He didn't argue. He showed up at the next board meeting with 60 other Marines.